This is the story of a village that was founded on water, nourished by water. It is faced with the choice of progressing with the destruction of water or keeping its relationship with it and possibly slowing down progress in the village. This story is told through the villagers, artists, scientists and educators. Come with us on our journey. If you arrive by plane, you will land at its 21st century state-of-the-art Chek Lap Kok International Airport on Lantau Island. If you are already in Hong Kong, you will take a ferry from Tung Chung to Shalowan. In either case, when you stand on Shalowan Ferry Pier, you will face the 21st century International Airport. When you turn around, you will see the Pa Kong Temple in the Qing Dynasty village of Shalowan. This separation of time and place is marked by less than 150 meters of sea. How people remember history and pass it on to their children, or in the case of written history to their readers, depends on so many reasons. Even for the elderly in their 80s, this generation of villagers remember little of how their village was founded. Western historians remembered because it was part of the colonial history of Hong Kong. The Qing Dynasty Imperial Navy and the Portuguese in Macau allied to fight the infamous pirate Zheng Po Cai. His pirate ships sailed in the waters between Chek Lap Kok, Tung Chung and Shalowan in the 19th century. So important was the battle that it was captured on painting. Perhaps the present generation of villagers have no memory of this battle because their ancestors were caught on the wrong side of the battle and it was safer to forget and move on. Perhaps the Qing Dynasty and British colonial power also thought it best that this battle not be remembered.
Why was there a battle in Shalowan? Here in Shalowan today, despite 20,000 people fighting a 9-day battle 200 years ago, nobody's got any memories at all. Why not? I think the answer is that process by which the pirates were overcome by getting them to join the Qing authorities. Once they joined the Qing authorities, having supported the pirates became a really, really bad thing. So people rewrote their histories. Since it was all oral history, nothing written, successive generations of Shalowan people narrating what father told son, told grandson, told great-grandson and so forth, just got rid of the battle altogether, so that now, 210 years later, there's no local memory.
Histories are written in different ways. Some are left on land as oral stories to be told from generation to generation. Others are written to travel. Homer wrote the Odyssey as the history of how the Greeks took 10 turbulent years to return home after destroying Troy. He wrote it in the form of an epic poem, which travelled from island to island as people travelled the sea recounting the poem. With the Flow Festival, it reached Shalowan as Margot Gunn and Dr. Vicky Wee deconstructed and reconstructed the adventures of Odysseus as promenade theatre. Odysseus and his men were not able to get home. They had to learn from the goddess Athena the importance of respecting the sea and living with it in harmony.
The ocean is what connects us all. You know, most of our planet is water and ocean, and it's through travelling and voyaging on the ocean that the cultures and countries and people have met each other.
The sea connects people and cultures. We in Hong Kong have learned Western culture because the West came to us by sea. And now, in the 20th and the 21st century, the West is also learning Asian culture as we return our cultures to the West. And that's why water is so important to all of us.
We have a character in our play, the ancient Greek goddess Athena, and she was described as having eyes the colour of water. I love this description because it means her eyes could change so much, change colour, in the same way that water not only changes colour, but also its state. It can be calm, it can be refreshing, it can be cooling, it can be angry, it can be stormy, it can be dangerous, it can be stronger than any of us. And this, I think, relates to our emotions.
And when I stand by the ferry pier, and I face forwards, I see the 21st century. And when I look backwards, I see the 20th century. And one thing I notice is that no matter whether it's the 21st century, with the airport, with the bridge, the sea for me never changes. But for me, the sea is both a destroyer of life, which destroys things, as well as a giver of life. And it's how I think we live. We have to live according to the rhythm of the sea. We cannot and we should not tame the sea. I think we should learn to live with it and to flow with it and to go with it, and then we'll be in harmony, and then everything will be at peace. I think the 21st century is trying to break up this harmony, to go against this harmony. And I think this is why we've lost the sea as a life giver. There's no fish, there's no agriculture anymore, there's nothing, because we've interfered with water. And I think we should now go back and respect water and live with it. And this is what flow means to me, that we teach people to once again appreciate water and live with water and live together in nature.
The sea has brought Greek culture to the village. It has also taken Chinese culture to Cornwall in England, where Sue and Pete Hill were born and brought up. They read about Chinese mythology so that they could build a sculpture that connected them to this ancient site. "The Dragon King spoke to us," they said. And so they set about to create a 7-meter-high sculpture of the Dragon King, standing in the sea in front of the Tin Hau Temple. The Dragon King stands in front of the goddess of the sea. The Hills have worked in many places in the world, and their style has always been to use the materials they find on site. The morning they arrived on the beach to think about their work, the tide was low, and they found the beach covered with flotsam and jetsam washed ashore. Most of it was plastic bottles and plastic objects discarded by people, not thinking they were polluting the sea. People were using the sea like a huge rubbish bin. And from this plastic waste, the Hills would build their sculpture by transmogrifying it. They found a way of turning plastic bottles and objects into artistic material.
We feel very connected to the natural world. We grow up in a beautiful place. In many ways it reminds us, Shalowan reminds us of home, because it is that place that's on the hinge between centuries. It's, if you look back one way, it's in the past, and you look in the other way, it's in the future. But it's surrounded by sea, and there are beautiful beaches and wonderful wildlife.
So last year, it was very apparent what a problem there is with plastic. Been kind of thinking about how we could, for one thing, remove some of those from the environment, and then also use them in the sculpture. So I knew from past experience that if you heat them with a hot air gun, they shrink and they turn into something else. So it's really important when you're using, or I think it's very important when you're using waste materials, that you modify them in some way. So you need to transmogrify them into something else. Otherwise it looks just like a bit of rubbish that you've stuck together. So when you shrink them, they turn into sea creatures, which is quite interesting. So the colour intensifies, and they start to look like fish or scales or jellyfish and things like that.
Actually finding ways in which our work can encourage people to look at their environment and look at nature and to relate to it and to be responsible about how they treat it as well.
As the Hills were inspired by the sea to build a huge sculpture, local architect William Tam turned his attention to water in the village. He was inspired by the myth of the Monkey King and his idyllic home in the water curtain cave. Emerald moss piled up in heaps of blue, white clouds like drifting jade, while the light flickered among wisps of coloured mist. 1 or 2 tall bamboos, 3 or 4 sprigs of plum blossom, A few pines that always attract rain.
因為對我嚟講咧，水簾洞咧其實係同呢個都係有啲唔同啦。佢個洞出邊有瀑布，但係個 association 咧係好多時係關於孫悟空啊，好開心嘅一群猴子啊，好似細路仔咁啊，喺入邊咧就好開心咁生活，亦啲唔受到出邊嘅束縛。咁仲有咧就係佢哋倒翻轉而家嘅角度嚟講，梗係好環保啦，就係摘果子啊，然之後飲嗰啲水啊，好開心喺度玩啊。
現代構思呢個水簾洞咧，就同原本嘅水簾洞有啲相似嘅，就係當然有一個水簾啦。咁但係個水簾咧就係我哋想解釋一下，即係水呢樣嘢就係點樣而家用水同以前水簾有好唔同嘅。即係而家我哋用水係自來水啊，或者有好多唔同嘅水源。咁我哋用水就係每個國家用水唔同啦。咁我哋想通過呢個水簾洞呢個 installation 咧，去講解一下，即係而家用水邊啲國家用得多啲啊，邊啲人用得少啲啊。咁就激發即係大家睇咗呢個水簾洞嘅時候，諗下即係我哋自己用水係咪要用咁多咧？嚇咁樣嘅一個理念。
我好記得咧，好開始嘅時候咧，阿 Lin 同我講咧，就係一種《西遊記》或者係 Odyssey 嗰個故事出嚟。咁所以喺個形象方面咧，係幾個唔同嘅 image come together。咁你睇見我哋呢一個咧，其實你可以想像佢又倒翻轉，好似一隻船反轉咗咁樣。咁呢個係即係幾種唔同嘅 idea 走埋一齊衝擊出嚟嘅。咁如果我哋有一個好似反轉咗嘅船，又倒翻轉我哋睇咧，個形狀咧又好似一條水滴滴咗落嚟咁樣。咁我哋就之後咧就將佢有少少教育意義嘅，譬如用水量啊，或者係等人 aware of 我哋自己嘅情況咧，我哋就想將呢幾個idea 走埋一齊，就做咗一個我哋而家所講嘅現代水簾洞。其實竹同水呢個，我覺得今次係好好嘅。其實佢啲係，如果你用道家嘅概念嚟講咧，佢好柔啊，兩樣嘢都係好柔。水就自然啦，即係你一路就係冇形狀嚇，一路咁過，同埋好適應個地形，同埋亦都係人好重要嘅一個資源。咁啊，我哋冇水嘅唔生活得啦，唔生存得啦。咁啊，地球點解有地球？就因為我哋有海洋，佢有水啦。咁所以呢個水，我諗真係要喚起大家即係嘅注意，唔係所謂係咪啲有 take it for granted。咁我哋其實應該係好珍惜呢個水源。咁另外喺竹嚟講，喺中國概念嚟講，所謂寧可食無肉，不可居無竹。咁我諗竹喺中國思維裏邊，除咗可以係好快生長到出嚟，隨風而擺，但係亦啲係一個好正直、有節氣啊！呢個係一個好有我諗係好有中國傳統思維一個形象化嘅一個植物嚟。咁所以我哋今次有機會將呢兩樣嘢啲擺埋一齊，我覺得都係一個嘗試咯。
竹咧，因為佢嗰個靈活性咧，係大嘅。如果你鐵咧，你下下要鋸嘅話咧，即係要裁短嘅話咧，就有問題咯。膠就冇，因為基於環保嘅問題啦。鐵咧我哋而家都仲做緊嘅。
Bamboo is a natural material that is nurtured by water. It used to be plentiful in the village, but plastic grew to be more accessible and convenient. And very quickly, the natural objects that we used in our lives for cooking, eating, and working utensils turned to plastic. Visuals count more than words. Li Shufan showed us in his installation on how plastic was literally choking us to death by blocking our waterways.
There is a very interesting development here because the airport is just right outside. And then you can actually see it, and then you hear all the sound of the flights flying over every 5 minutes. So I think it's very, very interesting to investigate the interrelationship between development and also nature. And the goal of the installation is to bring awareness to the usage of plastic. I think first it has to have impact. And that's why you see this whole stream is gone and it's all covered in plastic. I think our proposal is to magnify 100 times or even 500 times of what is actually happening in our world. It also has to have some sort of meaning, not only to cover the whole stream, but then why we cover the whole stream. We started to think about what does flow mean, and then we started to think about the environment, and we started to think about the plastic and how it actually affects our environment. Then we start to see this, if we can say it's a flow from, plastic to from rural to urbanized world, how plastic can actually affect this flow. Because for development, it's an irreversible flow. It's a very, very slow process. But then through this process, there were a lot of advantage, of course, but then there was also a lot of shortcomings, like the environment being polluted, water become less pure, and then more noise and all that kind of stuff. And plastic is one of them, because when you have more people, you got more plastic products. You use more plastic, and this flow is irreversible. We have thought about how this could be reused as a signage or as a cover for a small pavilion or some sort of installation for another place or whatever. So we are actively thinking of how to upcycle. Recycling it or upcycling it become another thing, not only as a building material, but also could become a product in itself. When you start to develop a city, when you start to develop a village, let's say, it starts to build up, it starts to become a little bit more urbanized every year.
我哋細個咧，因為個隔離鄰舍咧都識嘅，個小朋友咧都識嘅，成條村基本上全部人都識嘅。咁我哋一齊讀書，一齊放學。咁放咗學之後咧，就會走去看牛啊，又或者幫屋企做嘢啊，或者耕田啊，即係掹草啊嗰啲咁樣，樣樣我哋都會去做嘅。大家係好開心，因為咧就算我哋就話遇到天旱啊，咁咧我哋就會夜晚可能你哋唔識啲咩叫喐水啦，咁我哋喐水咧就係話你塊田好乾，你要由啲水咧浸到咧引啲水咧嚟浸到成塊田都係咧，咁咧佢哋夠晒嗰個水分咧，啲嘢先生嘅。咁咧我哋有陣時咧冇水咧，我就夜晚咧就一齊咧就去個坑嗰度，就有一個引水道，咁一路引好長，我哋都會半夜三更去做呢啲嘢嘅。咁我哋條村有陣時咧，我哋就唔夠水飲啦，咁好多時咧我哋都會就係話。多數都係飲井水嘅，以前細個咁或者跟住咧之後咧就飲山水啊。咁其實山水咧，我哋除咗耕種之外，飲用我哋都有，或者洗衫啊嗰啲都有嘅。咁你井水唔夠咧，咁我哋好多時咧就話咁就開始問政府申請個水塘啦，起個水塘啦。但係政府咧就係嗰個年代咧就好多時咧就話我未必幫得到你啦。咁咧佢哋就會話我不如我俾啲材料你啦，咁你哋或者俾啲水喉你啦，你哋自己諗辦法可唔可以起啦？咁我哋村民咧就好齊心嘅，咁每家咧就派啲人咧就係話將啲即係去到山上邊咧，即係山中間好高嘅位置咧，就會起一個水壩咁啦。咁但係都唔完善嘅。咁後期咧又再問政府咧，就係話申請俾我哋再真係同我哋起一個水塘啦，因為我哋沙螺灣有一個好靚嘅海灣啦。每逢咧，我哋喺舊歷嚟講咧，就係話初一15，即係以夏天嚟計下，初一15咧前後幾日咧，我哋就會去沙灘嗰度咧，又去揾食啦，掘蠔仔啦、打蠔仔啦、掘蜆啦、爬沙伯啦、網魚啦、捉蝦啦，咁樣樣都有嘅。其實我哋係好 free 嘅日子，係好開心嘅日子嚟嘅，大家係好嚮往嘅。
These are the village chief's childhood memories. We need to be reminded of what the village was like when it lived in harmony with water and the sea.
For the dolphin story, obviously it's fundamental because it's where they live. But I think the interesting thing about it is that we see the surface of the water, but we don't really consider much about what's going on underneath. But of course they are under the water 99.9% of the time. So that's part of the point of the story is to introduce another world, which is so near but yet so far to the reader's thinking.
We need to teach our children what happens when we disrespect the sea and water and cause pollution and death to sea animals. As Gavin Coates and Clementine Chan reminded us,
其實水嗰樣嘢就喺我畫嗰啲 illustration 裏邊咧，因為我哋做咗一本 playbook 俾佢啊嘛，咁所以入邊咧就基本上成本書都係關於水嘅，咁所以入邊有好多Bluey 關於水嘅嘢，即係例如佢潛水啦，佢同啲魚一齊啦，佢同啲海裏邊嘅動物一齊玩啦。
Kids learn from adults, so perhaps we need to remind ourselves of the powerful healing nature of water.
我去咗好多唔同嘅地方咧，聽到好多唔同嘅水聲啦，咁亦都用咗好多時間喺廚房啊、沖涼房啊，都係玩水啦，咁聽咗好多唔同聲音啦，咁從而得到一啲啟發啦，即係我就創作嘅時候咧就諗水同埋唔同嘅樂器嘅關係係咩咧？做敲擊嗰部分咧就用水啦，主要係咁我另外加咗法國號啦，同埋法國號手咧亦都係識做瑜伽嘅，於是乎我就用埋呢個元素喺我嘅作品裏邊。水對我嚟講咧係一個緩衝嘅地方嚟嘅，咁我聽水咧或者睇水咧其實係舒服嘅感覺嘅，即係佢打橫向啦。咁當然有直嘅水啦，咁有激動嘅水啦。咁但係對我嚟講，大部分都係一啲好舒服嘅聲音嚟嘅，即係好舒服嘅感覺嚟嘅。聆聽咧就唔係就咁聽咯，你聽咧有好多唔同嘅聲音嘅。其實聆聽其實係需要你嘅集中力嘅。你嘅集中力，你譬如好多人好嘈吵嘅時候，點解你會聽到某一個人嘅聲音咧？其實你係好專心去留心某一樣嘢嘅時候，好 focus 嘅時候咧，你係會聽到嘅。我首作品咧有好多微細嘅聲音啦，咁如果你就咁聽落去咧，如果比起環境嘅聲音咧，可能真係夠大聲嘅。咁但係如果你係留心去聽咧，咁你加上睇埋樂師嘅動作咧，其實你係 focus 到㗎，即係所以其實唔係話一定你要聽到聽得明同埋要知道究竟講緊咩故仔係未必係需要咯，可能從嗰個聲音開始咧係你都會理解到少少嘢嘅。
I think water is everything, and what I wanted to show with the different workshops, different activities, was how water is everywhere, and without water there is no life. On a practical note, when we talk about education, we talk about how education has to be real. You can sit in a classroom and learn facts, but you have to learn how to feel it and how to love it and how to have an attachment to places. And you can't do that with a book or an internet. You have to go there and see it. And just standing here on the edge of the ocean is the only way to teach young people what it means, not just what it is and what the things that live in it are and all the facts about it, but what it means to them and their heart. And I believe that's the way that we need to start getting young people to think about nature if we want them to look after it when they grow up.
Stunningly beautiful. The sound of the water, tiny little fish, butterflies everywhere. It's like a natural oasis in Shalowan, which is perfect for us because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking some water from the stream, very pure and clear. We're going to place our intention, that is, what would we like the water to carry for us? And it can hold thoughts or emotions. So we're going to invite people to take their emotional intelligence, place it inside the water. They're going to write this down. We're going to process with these thoughts, so it might be peace. Let's say it's peace. And we're going to process down to the shore, next to the dragon, and they're going to take this water, which has been infused with this power of peace, and place it into the water here in Hong Kong.
Every story has a beginning and an end. How will the story of Shalowan end?